Welcome everybody. This video is a startup video for everybody that purchased this database. It should really serve two purposes though. If you have not purchased this database or interested in it, it will also show you what it is, what it has to offer. The main goal is to show everybody that bought the database. There's enough of you out there that sometimes you get it and you still don't quite know what to do with it. So hopefully this will help you get started, what the intended purpose of it all is, and a couple things maybe you didn't know why it's there. So let's dive right in. I'm gonna put a new estimate in this training folder. Obviously you would put it in whatever folder your company's doing projects in, but for the purposes today I'll just make a new one right here. I'm going to right click, add estimate, and I'm just going to name this, let me drag this back over here, we'll just call it startup, and same thing for number. In the real world you would most likely put whatever estimate you've got. If you do an estimate numbering system, that's where the number slot would go there. For this purpose, I'm going to uncheck the live count box. So if you were not intending to use live count, you would uncheck that, but if you were going to use it, you'd want to leave it. So the first main thing is the database comes preloaded with a template. Now this template can be morphed into your customized template for your company, but I have this one in here just because the systems are assigned in there. The designations also live in there. That's a common thing I saw a couple times, folks that buy the database, then they don't start with this template, then you're not really getting all the designations I've built. So they live in there. So it's kind of crucial that this is your ultimate baseline. Even if it morphs into something else, that's fine. But I would start with this template to be your baseline, because all of that stuff does not go along for the ride if it's a new estimate that then you make a template. Now, you could copy all the designations from this template to another one, but that would be tedious and I would not even go down that path. So let me start from scratch here, and let me back up for a second. So I've made estimates from this template. Now this is how Anywhere works, and Enterprise works the same way. It always remembers what you did last, and it puts it in this box. So if you copied another estimate, then it would live here. So you do have to be mindful of what's in this box, because if you did copy an estimate previously, then you would have to pay attention and then swap this back to the template if your intention was to then use the template again. Now let's pretend this wasn't here. If you come to this box, if it was a new install, most likely this is going to be blank. So let me run through that real quick. If this is blank, you would check the copy job box and then hit the ellipsis on the end. Now in the case of this database that you all are buying, you would toggle down the company template, and I have these templates in here, and you would want to select that template at this level. So you click on it on the left and then it puts it on the right. You just want to highlight it basically, hit OK, and then that's what ultimately puts it in that box. So the first hurdle is you don't want this box to be blank. 9 times out of 10, that's not something you want. You either want to copy from a former estimate or start with this template, which is your template moving forward. Okay, so then let's go over these boxes down here real quick. Back to the copy job option. If you were copying an estimate, then it just depends on what you want to do. If you want a complete clone, then you would keep all these checked. That's fine. If you wanted takeoff and extension off, meaning say you wanted specific job items to come along for the ride, assemblies, designations, but you didn't want the actual takeoff, then you would uncheck takeoff and extension. Now I do recommend even the templates that you uncheck this box, because if somebody was to go into the template and do some erroneous takeoff, then this just guarantees that you won't be subjected to it, that it will leave that out. So I do actually recommend unchecking this just as a safety measure. One bit of advice I would give is just pause here for 1 second and make sure that it is that box that's unchecked, because I see a lot of times what happens if you get in a hurry and you uncheck closeout information, for an example, then your closeout will be blank. So that means any custom labor rates you had in there, equipment, anything that's on those closeout tabs would just be blank. So typically not good. You want that. So just make sure you're doing the right box there. So step 1 here, that's pretty much what you want to do. Name it, put an estimate number, however your company does that. Put the template there, uncheck that, and then you're good to go. And I'll repeat again that that's usually the first hurdle. Is copying from this template, I would say, is one of the most crucial parts, because there's a lot of stuff in there, which you'll see in a second. So I'm going to hit OK there. And it's doing its thing. Okay, so here we are. So for those of you that don't have the database, that maybe you're just watching this, the information over here on the right is custom. This starts getting down to the nitty-gritty of what comes out of the box, which is basically nothing, versus what we have available here. So that's what you're seeing over here. So if you were to get Accubid Anywhere, then this right side would be blank. You would not see this. So then let's get into some more customizations here. The designations live at that template level. So again, if you did not copy that template, then you would not see all this stuff that I've built in here. And you can see it's quite extensive. We have everything from site fixtures to troffers, linears, exits and EM lights, healthcare fixtures. We have controllers and all kinds of stuff. Also, you get into panels. We've got gear. And I will say, everything from about where the cursor here is up is all 100% custom. All that comes from the default Accubid database is these Accubid template designations. So if you bought this out of the box, and which that's why a lot of people come my direction, because when you buy that software, there's really not good stuff in there. It's just, it is what it is. And I get it. I think their stance is they don't know what people want, so they just let everybody develop it themselves. But that is a huge undertaking, especially with this software, because it is so capable. You really need somebody that knows how to run it, manipulate it. And yes, some people get it to a certain spot, but perhaps it's not the best spot. So if you were to just buy the software, all you're really going to get is these Accubid template designations, and you can see it's very limited. So that's all that you would be stuck with, is that stuff. And we have lots more, as you can see. And if you go down inside of these, there's just all kinds of different categories as well. Like the linears for sure. There's coves, recess, all the stuff that you see. So that's the one reason why you want to copy the template. Now if we go into the takeoff tab here, we'll get into another realm that you would not have if you did not copy this template. And for those of you that have the database and have purchased it, that's where all these tools will be useful to you, and you're not really going to harness the 100% power of this if you didn't start down this path, because you would be missing the designations. You wouldn't have the systems already pinned to the takeoff pads. So let's go down that path real quick. That's a good segue into that. So this systems list comes from that template as well. So this is all preloaded 1 through 51. And they're pre-synchronized with the takeoff pads. So if we click on site lighting, for example, then it populates the pad here with all the stuff you would need to accomplish site lighting. And very crucial part, I can't say enough, because if you did not copy that template, then you probably would not have this list. You may have the default Accubid list, which again is worthless. It is not near the same. The takeoff pads are not developed nowhere near the same, so you're not going to see that stuff. So very crucial why you start with the template, because you will get all this stuff preloaded. And you can just go down through here and click on whatever and play around with these, but each system generates a nicely laid out pad, which those of you that have Anywhere, now this kind of falls under the realm of whether you bought the database yet or not. This is for both folks. If you've at least seen Accubid Anywhere, you probably are recognizing already that it does not have near this capacity of, number one, ease of use, or just purposefully built assemblies that are actually needed. And this thing is packed, loaded. Whatever you need to do. The transformer one, that's a good one. And that's how I look at this systems list, is when you're getting started with this, you want to ask yourself, what are you about to do? And for an example, if the answer was, well, I have to run some feeders, so this is a good example of the mindset, then you want to look on this list at the answer for that question. So I'm about to run some feeders. Okay, I'm going to select that. Then the takeoff pad here puts everything in front of you that you would need for feeders. And again, pretty extensive. You got your feeder conduits, MC cable. You got the feeder by amp assembly, MI cable, which I will say right off the bat, you will not find that in the default Anywhere database. If you have to run duct banks, transformer feeds, all the accessories, junction boxes, LBs, flex whips, fire rates, core drills, it's all on here. So that's the main thing you want to look for the systems list. And the point of this whole session here is just to maximize what you've purchased. And it really stems from utilizing those designations and utilizing this systems list, which will get you to where you want to go. Now let's talk about these specifications. That's the other discussion I get from time to time, is with Accubid Anywhere, it's spec driven, but my stance is sometimes people get too hung up on that concept, quite frankly. So let me run through how to get all this to work real quick, and just the premise of my thoughts here. So let me back up. I want to make sure I'm purposefully clicking and explaining. So I'm going to hit the specification button here to the left of no specification. So click that, brings up the window. And this is one of the Anywhere traps that I will say that is a little weird, is you would think when you're staring at this window that you would pick add specification, because you think, yes, that's what I want to do. I need to add one, but that's not what you want to do. Either these should be opposite, or this should be completely labeled differently. This really should say build custom specification, because that's really the path that it leads you down. And I've never done this at this level. I've done it in the manager, but definitely not here. So I don't even know why that's there. So you want to do copy specification, always, I would say. And then I have in this custom database, this company standards section. All these ones are custom. You're seeing these ones grayed out because those are also ones that I've just abandoned. I don't use them. I've thought of other ways of doing things instead of convoluting it this way, and I just don't use them. So you may not see these grayed out because that is a rights you have to give yourself in the database, whether you see those or not. So don't be too distracted by those. So I'm going to load up the basics here. So branch conduit. Anybody new to Anywhere or isn't familiar with this, this is just like looking at your specifications. You're just simply defining materials at this point. Just like if you were reading the spec book and saying, well, is it EMT? If it's EMT, what kind of fittings do I need? Is it steel compression? Is it set screw? So that's all you're doing here is defining the material. So I'm just going to pick EMT set screw insulated. Sounds good to me. So that's a branch. And as defined here, branch is 1/2 inch to 1 inch. I'm going to throw a duct bank in here just for the heck of it. We've got medium voltage specs. We've got building wire specs, which I don't believe these are in the default database. I'm pretty sure. Certainly what is not is these ones that are differentiated between copper and aluminum. But we'll do copper. So these all look familiar, I'm sure. You're just defining, is it XHHW? Is it PVC 40? What kind of elbows do you need? I feel like I should explain this too. What you're looking at here is, as it's defined, horizontal PVC elbows. Now, in the duct bank assembly in this custom database, we have one of the best. It's so flexible, ask you all the right questions, and one of the questions it asks you is the vertical stub ups out of the slab, because that's another thing where I've detoured from probably Accubid's thinking. Is, to me, there's a huge difference between a horizontal elbow and what its material type is versus what's coming out of the ground. When it comes out of the ground, it could be many, many things. So maybe we'll take a look at that and I'll further explain. But for this purpose, I just want to clarify that you're not defining the vertical stub ups out of the ground at this level. It's only in-ground conduit and horizontal turning elbows within that run. All right, so duct bank, I'm going to put a feeder in here as well. We'll mimic that. I'm going to throw a device in here. We'll do plug tails, stainless covers. So I've got a branch, a duct bank, a feeder, and a device. Now, I wanted to go down this path because this is probably where I have customized this the most. I would say if you had this amount of specs in almost any typical job, the only one that I could see maybe going further is if you had cable tray, which I've got a cable tray section in here somewhere. If I do all this, so there's cable tray here. And that's why I've grayed out so many of these. I've made this work with the least amount of specs possible. So you don't need specs for disconnect switches and transformers and panels and stuff like that. It literally, I've whittled it down to, you just need specs for anything that's really conduit wire devices. That's it. So it really is simplified, and I think sometimes others overcomplicate it or think they have to overcomplicate it in that they need a spec for everything, but the reality is you really don't. At least not in this realm. So it's way simplified. So we're just going to leave these ones for now. I'm going to hit OK. And then that loaded those in there. So now what this looks like is I would put the feeder spec in if I was going to go down this path. And those of you that are familiar with this, you definitely want to go from top to bottom on the left before you touch anything on the right. So you want to make sure you've got what you want as far as your attributes. You want your strapping what you want. So we'll do something like this. We'll do on trapeze. Yep, that's fine. Then I'd pick my assembly. Let's move this up a little bit so we can see it. And then it asks you wires, wire size. We'll do the typical 225 amp here. That's good for a demonstration. 100 feet, one segment. Now this is unique to this database too. The standard database does not ask anything about a drop length. It does not segregate the horizontal versus vertical, but I do because I like being able to change the straps like this, because it is different. If I have a two-piece strut clamp on trapeze, then I'm going down 10 feet on each end, then that could look different. So I'm going to put strut on drywall for this 20 feet versus the 100 feet, which will be conditioned by this over here. So I like that. So I've got my spec there, got everything good. So then you'll notice I got the 100 feet here. I've got my straps, my two-piece strut clamp for that. And then down here you'll see that drop. I've got 20 feet with strut toggle bolt, because I said on drywall, and I got a little different scenario there. So I like how it separates that. And also for live count that helps too, because if you think about that scenario, then you can measure horizontally, get the straps for that, but then you're not stuck with those same straps for any vertical pieces. You always have control in this database on horizontal versus vertical. Let's do a device real quick. I know that's another one that might get confusing how I do them in here. So there's receptacle devices. Now in my environment, let me get these straight. So the branch feeder goes here, and we're going to want to pay attention to this because this is actually very important. So we're going to say in metal stud clip, branch conduit up here. I'm going to click on this. And I do have a little tutorial over here to the right, just because this does get confusing to people. And it's telling you for devices, the branch spec goes up in this main spec, which that's the one I've got over here. The device spec goes down here, because we're really controlling a lot of information here. We're controlling the conduit that is the drop length, and then we're also controlling these devices, which could be hospital grade, whatever. That could be a lot of different things. Now, what else is unique to this database specifically is 3/8 triggers MC cable. So all of my assemblies, switches, receptacles, any devices like that, you can toggle from MC cable to conduit just by triggering this size. So it looks like I'm good. I usually like to double check. Branch, got my straps, device spec there, check. Good. So now we can hit OK. And done. Now if we toggle that down, we've got all of the right stuff. Devices, plug tail, box, straps. There's my MC cable. Now let me give you a quick anywhere. So if you're on Accubid Classic, this is where you can't even compare these two, because let me copy and paste a couple of these real quick just to give a quick demo on this power. And quite frankly, a lot of people that use this for a while sometimes don't even know you can do this as well. So it's good to go over. So let me copy and paste a bunch of these just to give you some power here. Let's do one more just for good show. So I'm going to copy all of those. I'm going to add copied row again. Okay, this will get the point across. Now this could be 8 or 9 assemblies, or it could be 100. It really doesn't matter. This could work. So let's do this real world scenario. Let's say it's bid day. Somebody's reading the specs and they say, you can't use MC cable. There's a little note here. It says this one condition, which is our condition, that you can't use it. So you can just highlight all of these. Right click. Go to your update global variable. So this is just asking you what do you want to change. And I'll say conduit size to, we'll say it went from 3/8 to 3/4. We'll go a little extreme. So that's all I'm doing. I'm saying I want to change the conduit size to 3/4. I just hit OK, and you'll notice it swapped them all out. It resolves, and it knew to change everything. So now I've got, you'll notice here, EMT instead of the MC cable. I've got couplings. I've got conduit clips instead of MC clips. It changed everything. I've got connectors instead of MC connectors. It swapped everything. And that speed really does not flutter too much based on volume, meaning this could have been 200 assemblies. It does not matter. It would have taken the same amount of time. But update global variable, awesome, awesome feature. All right, so let's go. I think that's good for the template. Let's look at one last thing since I mentioned it. I don't want to make this too long. I just want to get everybody up and running here with all the basics. Let's mess with that duct bank one real quick here. So let's do like secondary service. That gives me my duct bank. So I'm going to change my spec to the duct bank. That's good. I'm going to say it's a base spacer. Just leave that blank. Click my duct bank assembly. Now you'll notice right away that this is a beast of an assembly, but it is turnkey. It does pretty much everything. So 4-inch conduit, 2 conduits wide, 2 high, 3-inch separation. I can change my chair spacing. We'll do 4 conductors. What the heck? I'm just going to pick some random sizes here. I can choose how many runs to fill. So this is always a multiplication, 2 times 2. That means I got 4, so maybe I want to fill 2 of them. Now here's that slab transition question. So this is the conduits coming up out of the ground, or quite frankly, if it doesn't come out of the ground, we do have options. If there's no transition, you can bell end it. You can do a connector and a lock nut. You can do a plug. So even if it's not coming out of the ground, you can signify that and say something like a plug. So let's pick that one there. And let's say on the other end, we've got a rigid stub up. Sure, we'll do that. Now, if it's metal conduit, much like this question here, you got a couple variables too when it's metal. And that's what it's saying. What kind of bushing do you want on metal conduit? Because it could be a grounding bushing, which that's what I'll do because that's a typical scenario. We've got underground detector tape. You can pick between standard, detectable, none. We'll do our 100 feet. This is how many bends. We'll do 1. So that's just like actually this picture over here. That would be this kind of scenario where you're just doing a kick bend, and you can say it's a 30 or 45. So this picture actually leads into a good example of that. So that's other than a horizontal 90. So if it was a strict 90 bend, we could say we have one of those. And then the other bend is, again, like the picture over here, just a kick. And then we'll say 1 segment. And again, you would be hard pressed to find an assembly like that, especially not in the default database. And that resolved quite quickly. And you can see it gives you everything. There's I've got 4 conduits. Remember, I had 2 by 2. So I said I wanted a 90 degree, so it gave me 1 for each one. I put the 45 in there, so it gave me 4 of those, 1 for each run. There's my spacers. It gave me a duct bank tie down as well. It gives you glue. It calculates everything. We got wire lube in there, strings, pretty much everything. Then it goes down to our transitions we picked, which there's our end cap, because we said the one end was just capping. And that worked pretty good. And there's our coupling and our rigid conduit. So our slab transition, we said 4 feet. So 4 times 4, that's 16. So that all works out. And you can edit that. So if we went back in here and you wanted either a longer vertical piece, that's what this is. So that's where it got the 4 feet. So you can make that 6, 3, whatever. All right. So that should be good for a quick startup. I definitely would cycle through the systems here. Those are very useful. All these specs, I'm sure you can see from these examples here, everything has already been vetted out. It just works. You get a lot of complete material from these assemblies. So I just encourage you to play around with these and really keep the specs rather simple, like what I did there. Just keep it aligned with what you're doing. Feeder spec with feeders, branch spec with branch conduit, or in the case of the devices, put the branch spec up in the upper part, the device spec down in the lower part. And duct banks have their own spec, and it pretty much just works like that. It's pretty simple. So the other thing that with the device to mention quickly is the MC cable just worked too. And that's where I've consolidated all the information. You don't need a separate spec to change that device from MC cable to conduit. It just works. It's clean, it's simple, so you don't have to think about multiple specs for multiple scenarios. It's all built in, it all just works. All those heartaches are already done. It's just fully developed, complete, and just made for ease of use. So I'll keep making these videos with other things to train everybody on. And those of you that have bought the database, I want to thank you all again. I appreciate it very much, and I hope you are utilizing it to the fullest like this. And for those that have not bought it, that are watching this, reach out. The email's on the top there, that Anywhere database at Outlook. Feel free to reach out there. And this thing will certainly save you a lot of implementation time. It'd probably take you at least a year or two to get to this point where this one is already at. It's already vetted out. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.